Xi Jinping loses twice to these two men, actually. If I told you that a Canadian citizen who owns a company registered in the Cayman Islands, which is a British territory, does a deal with an American company over some seaports, you'd be like, that's a pretty normal thing to do. But now Beijing and Hong Kong, both governments there, are voicing their opposition to this deal. Yep, so a deal that really on the surface has no relationship attached to either Beijing or Hong Kong is now intervening to try to stop this. And the company that's in hot waters in Hong Kong, CK Hutchison, which is owned by billionaire Li Ka-shing's family, is now being called a treasonous activity by Beijing, a betrayal to China's national interest and national security. And it makes you wonder, what exactly is the issue here? The Panama deal between BlackRock and CK Hutchison would see about 43 ports in the Panama Canal transferred to BlackRock, and this deal was widely seen as the businessman Li Ka-shing, his idea of trying to avoid being stuck in between the US and China in this new Cold War. On the surface, the deal itself has no relations or ties to Beijing, but for Hong Kong, it kind of makes sense considering that the headquarters of CK Hutchison is in the city of Hong Kong. So for Beijing, there's really nothing to worry about in the first place because they were never really involved in the parties. Unless, of course, they got something to hide. Which makes me wonder, are they indirectly validating the claims by the Trump administration that the Panama Canal is indeed in fact being operated by the CCP rather than Panama themselves? By trying to extend their grip and influence on CK Hutchison, which I have to emphasize one more time, is registered in the Cayman Islands, are they saying that every single company that operates on the mainland, including in Hong Kong and Macau, is subjected to the control of the Chinese Communist Party? Which by that extension, logic-wise, can we also consider TikTok, whose parent company, ByteDance, still sits in Beijing, by the way, should be viewed as equally in that they're also controlled and operated based on the CCP's operations and control. And if they admit that, it's totally fine, because precisely the reason why the US even wants to do the Panama deal, or at least the talk of over the Panama Canal in the first place, is that they feel the national security of the United States is threatened here. Because, you know, the Panama Canal was actually built by the United States for Panama, not for China. The intention is very clear. So this should be a clear, loud message for the US to know that China does want to harm their national interest when it comes to the Panama Canal. This is no longer some sort of a closed door secret. This is an open secret now. Now, part of the reason why I think the CCP is so mad, in particular Xi Jinping, is I believe that this was a bargaining chip, a piece of the chess puzzle when it comes to negotiating with the Trump administration on, in my opinion, the TikTok deal. Because the issue here is that TikTok is facing its deadline for potentially needing to sell or be banned in the US. So while it's still looking for its buyer, we understand that ultimately who gets a say in whether or not TikTok gets sold or not is Xi Jinping himself. And in this respect, we could see that the Panama deal is part of the negotiation with the Trump administration to see if whether or not TikTok would be able to survive. But now, of course, the company themselves didn't really ask the CCP for permission. They just did the deal right away. And so, of course, Xi is very big mad about this whole thing. They essentially lost a big piece of the puzzle before they even got to go negotiate with Trump. Look at what Secretary Rubio said in an interview.
But there's no doubt that will happen. The president has, in his first term, he'll do it again now. I mean, he'll meet with any foreign leader, basically, if there's a good reason to do so. I think that meeting will happen, but there's none scheduled at this moment.
Now, that the U.S. and China doesn't need to meet right now with their top leaders between Trump and Xi because, well, there's nothing really productive to talk about in their meeting right now. So you can see that Beijing is the one that's really trying to make these meetings happen because they're the ones who really want to get things from the US and not the other way around. Now, you might be asking by extension some questions like, well, in that case, shouldn't the CCP have some say in the TikTok deal as well, considering the fact that, well, the United States is banning it for national security reasons, right? Well, actually, no, because TikTok operated in the US, and so it must abide by United States laws. And so if it doesn't, then, well, it's on the ban list. Whereas the Panama deal is not under the Chinese Communist Party's jurisdictions. It's in Panama, a third country. It's not the US, it's not China. So why the heck are they stopping a private company-to-company deal from happening? Unless, like I mentioned, there's some interest in it. Maybe there's two other points that you will hear arguments online against this whole thing, right? First one is Nvidia, which is an American company, so that doesn't stand because they're an American company, they have to follow by American laws. Second one, ASML, which is a Dutch company that supplies the semiconductor machines for making them. Well, they also want to do business with the United States, and plus a lot of their parts come from the United States, so there's no way for them to not follow US's orders when it comes to chip selling to China, right? So both of these cases, they want to do business with the US, so they made a decision not to go against orders from the United States. So let me know your thoughts on this whole thing with Li Ka-shing's company, and do you think that ultimately he will bear the pressure from China and continue with the deal, or will he back down in fear of retaliation? But then also the question is, who does he fear more, China or the United States? Let me know in the comments. All right, I said Xi loses twice, so the second time he loses is internal. And this is the man. He Weidong has disappeared for about a week now by the time you watch this video. And he disappeared on March 11th following the conclusion of the two-session meetings in Beijing. Why does it matter? Well, He Weidong is Xi's right-hand man in the military when it comes to the Taiwan invasion plan. He is directly in charge of the military preparation and the invasion of Taiwan. So for him to disappear, it indicates a lot of different things. First of all, this wasn't Xi Jinping's own doings. Unlike the previous cases with Qinggang, with the downfall of the defense ministers, those were Xi Jinping's own doing, but this time, not quite. Now this goes back to the summer of last year, which we'll talk in more details later. But the reason why this is so interesting is because usually with the top heads of the military or the politics, if they disappear, they immediately reemerge to dispel any rumors, right? To give you the slap on the face to say that, haha, you've been lying. Except this guy hasn't done that. He missed an all-important symposium meeting on the anti-split law, which means the split between China and Taiwan. And so he's the guy who was responsible for the Taiwan invasion, and he missed that. Even Zhao Leji, the guy who had a respiratory tract infection, missed the closure of the two sessions meeting, came back and was in the symposium. So people like those in those positions, they quickly come out even if they need to just show up there, for a second just to get their photos taken, that sort of thing. But they have to dispel the rumors. But this guy, he's been gone for a week. So this tells us that Xi Jinping's power base in the military has fundamentally been reduced, shifted, and this, you might be wondering, well, maybe he just gave up on the Taiwan invasion plan. And of course he didn't, because he's been planning this invasion since 2012 when he got into power. So what happened? Well, last summer in July, there was the third plenum meeting, and rumor says during that time, Xi Jinping suffered a stroke. And it was around this time that there was a group of elders within the CCP, retired, former officials, that banded together and essentially took over control when he was sick. And they declared that Xi Jinping can no longer be a single man who gets to say, about everything. And so they stripped some of his power, especially the military side, from him to the first vice chair, Zhang Youxia. And since then, we've been slowly looking at some of the dynamics shift within the military. For example, there's the disappearance of Mao Hua, who was another member of the top echelon of the chair, in the war chair. And then he disappeared. He was a Xi Jinping ally. And the investigation into Dong Jun, the third defense minister to disappear. So a lot of this then now comes He Weidong, which is probably the biggest guy you don't want to see disappear, but has done so. It indicates to us that whatever case about Taiwan, about Xi Jinping's agenda in the military, that is no longer there. And Zhang Youxia's expansion of power within the military as well, he promoted his deputies to be in charge of the military police as well. And as well as, if you think about this, right, the CCP leadership holds three titles. The paramount leader has three titles: chairman of the Central Military Commission, the general secretary of the CCP, and the chairman of the PRC. Without the first title, he has no power whatsoever. He's just a figurehead. So if he controls the military, by the way, it's the party's military, not the country's military. He has absolute power. He doesn't control it, well, he has just basically nothing, right? So this is starting to sound like a ChatGPT written fantasy novel, but not quite. Actually real, because we understand that a few years ago that Xi Jinping had absolute control. 2022, there was no way we were thinking that he would lose anything, right? That he was set to launch the invasion in 2027 against Taiwan, and that he could just silence anybody, whoever he wants to. But there's one factor that we never could account for, which is health. And that is something, even if you're Kim Jong-un, who says they don't pee or poop, or you're Xi Jinping in this case, no matter how great and glorious your image may be, health is something that you simply cannot avoid. Everybody dies in the end. So what's next? Well, like I mentioned, time can tell everything. We just have to see if He Weidong eventually shows up. If he doesn't show up for a few months, well, we clearly know that he no longer exists, at least in terms of, as a person in the CCP, and he'll just end up getting the Qinggang treatment, where everybody pretends like they don't know who he is. But in the end, it tells us that Xi Jinping's exit from the CCP is more imminent and closer than we thought. And that's something we're going to be watching for in the upcoming episodes of Elite Politics. So thanks so much for watching this episode. Let me know your thoughts about these two men in the comments, what you think about their futures will be, and what about some of the things that they've done, if you think they're going to continue to do with it. Let me know your thoughts. And thanks for watching this episode. Take care. Bye-bye.